All right, full disclosure, I was not paid to make this video by SK, was not paid by Zeus himself. This was entirely done of my free will, and there is no money being exchanged in hands. But either way, the news came out today. It's been rumored for a while that the former coach of SK, former Luminosity, Zeus, joined. He joined the team with FNX and Taco back in November. He just left the team. He joined Immortals, the other Brazilian team, the next best Brazilian team that recently made the transition over to North America as well. And he's actually not going to be coaching them. He's going to be a player. He's taking over for Showtime. And just talk a little bit about my opinion of Zeus as a coach with SK. In my opinion, he actually became one of the top tier coaches in the scene, along with Starks and Threat are the other two. Like those three, I think. In my opinion, I've really viewed them as like the tier one in terms of coaching. Guys who did a very, very exceptional job considering how new this coaching role is in teams. I think Zeus was very, very effective with SK. And the way I kind of view his time, his career, his period with SK. It's very similar to stories I've heard in terms of business. You have business consultants. I know my father has done some of this as well, which is kind of why I make that connection as someone who comes in and is consulted to improve a certain aspect of the company or improve the company in a certain way. And they do such a good job that it actually phases out their own position, their own job. So where they improve this aspect that they are no longer needed. And that's kind of what we saw of SK. And you could kind of see, you could kind of tell towards the end of it, the way SK is playing, that they started going away from these set tactics and set strategies. But I think he played a large part in like creating the foundation for the style of play that SK currently has. He helped transform them, transition them from those structured executions into a more loose play style. Just from talking to him, and even the players on SK, I've had, especially at Cologne, I had a good conversation with him and Taco and Cold about how their team is playing. They have it's very Fnatic-esque in a way, a little bit more based on teamwork and a little bit more based on fundamental trading and everything like that. A little bit more structured than Fnatic, but still they have on each map they have this number of set openings, and from those 3-4 set openings they can actually transition into 3 or 4 mid-round setups or tactics they kind of have, and from those mid-round tactics they can transition into a number, maybe 3 or 4 more late-round decisions that they can make. So it's very fluid and it's very easy to adapt and change into a new setup, a new way. And you could see that in the way they play. I know the best example I always have for SK in terms of how they play tactically is on Overpass, where they use Taco as a guy to just hold down that B bomb site, and he essentially is there so that he keeps open the option of transitioning into their 2 tactics they might have towards the B bomb site, so they can put pressure on A, and as long as Taco's doing his job, he's staying alive, he keeps control of those sewers so that they can actually very quickly transition down the stairs on Overpass into those B hits. So you could see this in different maps that they find ways to seamlessly transition from one of their openings into one of their mid rounds, and then seamlessly again, depending on the information they have, into what they want to do late round. And I think Zeus helped them a lot with that. Because of this philosophy of how they play with all these different interchangeable tactics throughout the round. And I'm assuming this was built with I'm assuming and also very confident that this was built with Fallen, that those two work together very well. Instead of when they research teams, instead of flat out anti-stratting these teams and seeing exactly what strategies are going to get thrown at them, their entire thought process was find weaknesses in teams early on in these rounds, find ways early in rounds against each team they're playing, not to counter the overall strategy, but just find ways to get that first kill, find ways to get an opening pick, find ways to push back aggression and find a kill, because this team has always been, even before Zeus and FNX and Taco joined the team, this team was always very, very good at playing with man advantages. One of the best teams in the world at it, in fact. Dating back for some time, very good fundamentally when they have an advantage in terms of manpower, because this played to the strength of this team. So it's a very smart thing to do to be like, okay, our team is very good at this aspect of the game. Let's find ways to put ourselves in those situations more often, and that's kind of what they focus on. They would say, hey, this guy likes to peek here, this guy likes to get aggressive, or when we see this smoke come out, we know someone's going to push this way, this place on this side of the map. So let's find ways to punish that. Let's always be set up to punish that. Let's know what to look for. And obviously, I don't want to minimize the impact of guys like FNX and Taco joining the team. I think those are two very crucial parts to the success of this team. But together with Zeus, him coming in, knowing how to use these parts because he was formerly the coach of their team, which was Games Academy before they became Immortals. I mean, he had coached these players, so he brings them in, and with Fallen, they kind of use these pieces and have created these strategies and the foundation for now this powerhouse that they are, that this the world's best team. One thing I want to say before moving on to his idea to talk about him joining Immortals and how I think of that, I want to just pass along the idea. Don't let the success of SK moving forward, because they are the best team in the world. They're going to continue to have success. There's actually I can't think of another team right now that is poised to be able to consistently beat them event after event. There are teams that will be able to beat them. They will not win every event, but they're by far the best team in the world, consistently on an event to event basis. Don't let that success that's going to continue for this team let you believe that he wasn't important, because he is going to leave and they're going to continue having success after his departure. But he helped a lot in getting this team to where they are. He has a lot of impact on the philosophies that they use in game, and it's important to always remember that. So 2 months down the road, you're not saying, oh, Zeus actually wasn't that important to this team, because they're still winning in events. They just won another major perhaps. So don't let that happen. On joining Immortals, he's joining Phelps, Lucas, Henny, and Bolts. Now, for the most part, outside of Bolts, this was the team he coached before joining Luminosity, and then which became SK, obviously, as Games Academy. So he's going to have some pretty good knowledge, pretty intimate knowledge of how these guys like to play, what roles they fulfill, how what they want to do on the map, what they want to do in each situation. And this is actually very interesting for me to do, because it's very hard to criticize this decision of him to step down from coaching to become an active player so late in his career per se. He's 28 years old. It's very hard to criticize this as a former player, because just giving up playing is very difficult to do. I know a lot of players struggle with it, in the past, and I'm sure once we start seeing new players from the current CS:GO landscape start to retire and drop out of the game, it's very, very tough to do, because just the competition, the fact that it takes up such a big portion of your life, it's very hard to stay away, especially if you're remaining close to the competition and the game by being a coach. I mean, this is a guy who, as a player, he's probably dreamed of playing on these big stages, and as a coach behind SK, he's up there winning all these majors. He's being in these environments that he never had the opportunity to be part of as he was playing in his career in his early 20s, especially in Brazil, the smaller region to come from. So it's tough to criticize, but we'll give it a good shot. I think that he's going to have two big struggles. The first one is that, on top of coming into this new team and having that burden of leadership, he's going to be expected to the in-game leader of the team. He's going to be expected to come up with tactics and strategies that these guys can use. He's going to be expected to be able to transform some of the things they're currently doing that maybe he doesn't like, he doesn't see him play, focusing on fundamentals, making sure they're doing things the right way, because this is one of the trademarks of Immortals is, when it comes to crunch time, they do get very individual. They do make some of those fundamental mistakes in late round situations. So he's going to have to work on those. And all the while he's working on this, he's also got to catch up individually. So not only is he going to be watching demos, not only is he going to be that guy coming up with tactics in his free time, but he's also got to start deathmatching now. He's also got to, get to a point, because, the players from SK have mentioned to me in the past that he's a good player. We haven't seen him against top tier competition. I'm pretty sure he's only really had... obviously the big chunk of his experience is going to be within the Brazilian scene. So playing against these other professional teams, it's going to be another eye-opening experience in terms of just individual skills. So he's got to improve in that way, all at the same time while focusing on the team, focusing on his teammates. It's going to be very, very difficult to juggle. Not that they can't do it, because we obviously have seen the pretty insane work ethic of the Brazilian players and teams. He's older. He's 28. This is the second struggle I think he's going to face. He's older. He's 28. At that point, you kind of your skill ceiling is kind of known and established. It's very hard to break into that next level of individual play when you're this old, because you have your habits, you have how you like to play the game, you have how your movement's pretty set. On top of all this, like I mentioned in the first struggle that I said he's going to have with splitting all this time between the team and individual, it's going to be very difficult to change some of these habits. It's going to be very difficult to improve certain aspects of his game, because he's going to be focusing on so many different things. The good news here is that Showtime's performance, he's not a bad player, but it's not like he was anything, he's not mind-blowingly crazy player. It's not like this is some unattainable task to replicate what Showtime was able to put into the game. I mean, this actually reminds me very much of SK in general when they came over. When they were still Luminosity, before they even had Zeus, Taco, and FNX, is they made that sacrifice, short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain, where they kind of changed their playstyle. They kind of started transitioning into a new playstyle, and they were into a lot of struggles. I think Immortals is going to hit this same thing, where Zeus is probably going to change some of the ways they play, some of the things that they do. And on top of that, just the dip in that individual level, even from Showtime, it's going to be a dip at the beginning. So this is going to be short-term issues, and it might not even pay off long-term. So this is actually a pretty big gamble. From seeing him in FPL and Rank S, and from playing in FPL and Rank S myself, as former players at professional levels, your aim can catch back up. It's not the aim that's the biggest struggle. I don't think he's ever going to be some kind of like Olaf or Nico or Forrest type player where you're just blown away by the kind of aim that he has. But it's mostly your movement. It's mostly your positioning. That's really the struggle at a professional level, like putting yourself in the good situations, the advantage situations, and being able to take the fights that you're good at, take the fights that you're confident in taking. I know that's kind of the big struggle of missing out on the competition for so long. So that's something he'll have to work on. And the other way this is actually good for Immortals is that he's replacing the leadership void of Peacemaker, who left to Liquid. So this allows Bolts to go back to just straight up fragging, because Bolts was taking on more of that in-game leadership role, more of that tactician role, and he was also one of those players who was emerging as this star on this team. As he was like the third, fourth option on Luminosity when he was on that team, but on Immortals and on Games Academy before that, Bolts was kind of becoming the man. Him and Phelps have been very impressive. So Bolts can get back to that. I mean, that's one big tool that Zeus is going to have to be able to employ, is this guy who's shown that he can compete. Now, the big risk that Immortals is taking here as well is they're a top 10 team right now. They're a team that is contended to qualify for majors. They've missed out on the past two, and maybe this is what spurred them to make this change, saying we need kind of this leadership, we need kind of this experience to come in and help us in these crunch pressure situations that we've historically struggled in, because they were favorites to make MLG Columbus. They were favorites to qualify for Cologne as well, and it's as I mentioned earlier, they do have this issue when they're in these matches, when they're trying to close out matches, they make mistakes, in the last 5 rounds of this game, when it's 14-12, they'll make a mistake. When leading up to that point, they weren't really making them. So he'll be able to instill some of that discipline. Now, personally, I have to say, and I feel bad because I do like Zeus a lot. He's a really cool guy to talk to. Guy I enjoy having beers with at events. I personally would have liked to see him remain as a coach of a team, whether that's Immortals. That's one thing. Obviously, that would have been the natural change for him, leaving SK and coaching Immortals and trying to bring them up to par, because they're also fellow Brazilians. But also, think of the NA teams who would jump at the prospect of bringing him in as coach. NA organizations that can pay massive amounts of money. And I know money is probably the last thing on his mind as someone who's coming back to compete. He's probably not worried about the money. He wants to be on that stage hoisting the trophy. But think of these teams like Cloud9. We've often been talked about needing a coach. Slemmy has been a discussion of whether he can transition into the coaching role so they can bring in a little bit more talent. But imagine they bring in Zeus. A team like Optic, who's one of the up-and-coming teams in North America, who's impressed recently. They just recently signed Devilwalk, but I know before that they were looking for a coach. It was open advertisement. Obviously, if they had known that Zeus was going to be in the market, they might have made a play for him. That would have been a really cool thing to see. Look at Echo Fox. I know they currently have Frost, who's kind of a management coach position. Not sure how much he does tactically, but if you look at how Zeus worked with Fallen, another tactician, another opera as well. If he goes to Echo Fox, then Zeus all of a sudden has this new partnership with Sean Gares. Imagine the craziness, the cool things that could come from, is these two tactical minds bouncing ideas off and figure out ways to incorporate that and make it work. And that's also a team, Echo Fox, with the backing of Rick Fox and his power. He's shown that they've shown that they want to go out and they want to grab some young talents that they can develop and bring into a new system. I don't think it's necessarily working with the lineup they have, but I mean that's obviously a team that's going to be more than willing to say, this isn't working, let's go get a new player. Who do we need? Who can we bring into this? They're also favorites, by the way, to be getting Tarek when he eventually does decide to come back at competition by the end of the year. Splice, a team that, obviously we're not necessarily high, and I'm not even sure that they're on the radar in terms of top North American teams. But all the talent that they just brought in, Cillian, they brought in Machine Gun. They just brought in all this international talent. They have all these different philosophies and everything like that. That would be a cool project, a cool challenge for Zeus to come in and see if he can manage all those different play styles, mold them into a team. Because this is also, I mean, you got to think Splice is like a poor man's FaZe with bringing in all these all-star players from these different regions. And we see the struggles FaZe have. Maybe he even coaches FaZe. Look at all the talent on that team. Maybe he goes to them, and it's something where, give a coach all this talent, all these players that have so much different utility, so much different ability to be great players, and see what he can come from it. So I would have liked, just because I have him in that tier 1 as a coach, to stay in that coaching role. I think he's, especially early on, Immortals with him is really, really going to struggle, just because he's got so much on his plate all of a sudden. So the idea is it's going to be something that you can't really judge initially. I don't necessarily like it in the long term, but obviously a guy like Zeus, you wish him the best of luck. It's hard to stay away as a player, but definitely as a coach, I think that is eventually where he's going to return to. And I think that's somewhere that Zeus actually can have the most impact as a coach, because he does have like this air of leadership around him. He does have this air of discipline that he can instill on these teams, and very hardworking guy as well. I think as a coach, he's going to be much, much more impactful as a player.